Hello, my name's Al and today I'm going to show you how to bleed your Shimano road disc brakes. You don't need an awful lot of stuff to bleed your Shimano brakes. Some Allen keys, a 7mm spanner, a small flat bladed screwdriver, paper towel, Shimano TL-BT03 bleed kit or similar. The essential parts of this bleed kit are your Shimano mineral oil, your syringe with a bit of rubber hose, your Shimano bleeding tool. Now this is a cup that screws into the top of the brake lever and allows you to bleed any air from the system. And you're also going to need a spacer for your caliper. Shimano recommend replacing their mineral oil in their brakes when it becomes discoloured. So this can take quite a bit of time, but you might find that you want to bleed your brakes in case some air's become trapped in the system. Say if you've had to shorten a hose, or if you bought the bike and you don't feel that the brakes were particularly well bled from the factory. Mineral oil will contaminate your brake pads and your brake rotors. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the wheel and we're going to remove the brake pads. So on this wheel, it's got a bolt through axle. So we'll remove that, get that well out of harm's way, and then you should have a little clip which fastens onto the pad retaining pin that runs through the caliper. So remove that, put it somewhere safe, and grab your small flat bladed screwdriver, and then you can remove the pad pin. Just unscrews, slides out. Put that somewhere safe also, and remove your pads. They're right and left specific and they do have a spring in the middle. Just keep them together, pop them somewhere safe. With the rotor and pads out the bike, then we need to make sure that we don't pull the lever, because this will cause the pistons to advance out of the caliper. We'll only have to push them back. So what we're going to do whilst we bleed it is we're going to fit this bleed block. You'll need the right one for your caliper. It should come with your brakes. And we'll just pop that in between the pistons and secure it by giving the pad pin a couple of turns just to stop it dropping out. Going to show you two bleeds here. So one's going to be a super basic bleed where we're going to put the bleed tool onto the lever and we're just going to try and remove any of the air from the brake lever just to firm up the feel of the brake. Then we're going to do a full bleed, which will be passing fluid from the caliper up through the hose and then out the lever into the bleed tool. What you need to bear in mind whilst you're doing either of these bleeds is that air is always trying to rise to the surface. So if you've got any weird routing, then you might need to take your caliper off the frame or the fork to give it a nice clear route to the top. Whatever kind of bleed we're going to perform, you're going to have to get to the master cylinder itself, and that sits under the hood here on this particular Shimano lever, and we have the bleed port screw here at the top. With the hood peeled back and out the way, we can get our 2.5mm Allen key. And we can remove the bleed port screw. Should have a little O-ring on it. Make sure that's there. It's not dropped on the floor or it's caught in the brake, and then put that somewhere safe because you'll need it later. So this is your Shimano bleeding tool, and this just screws into the lever. Just nip it up. It's got a little O-ring on there to create a seal. So it's only made out of plastic, so you'll break it if you do it too tight. It has a plunger. Remove that. And for our simple bleed here, just to try and firm up the lever a bit, we're going to add some mineral oil. You don't need an awful lot. Just enough to cover a few mil at the bottom of the tool. And what we're going to try and do is see if we can get any air to come out the lever. We're going to encourage it up and out the system by pulling the lever, giving it a flick, and we are already had a few bubbles come up through the fluid. Obviously those bubbles of air will be replaced with brake fluid, and it does firm up the feel of the lever. You can give the system a bit of a tap whilst you're pulling the lever, just to help any bubbles make their way up and out of the system. Okay, that has already had a fairly significant effect on the lever travel there, so that has firmed the brake up a fair bit. If you're happy with that and you want to stop, then grab your plunger, pop it into the bleed tool, take your Allen key and your bleed port screw, and we're just going to remove that pot. And refit our screw. Just nip it up, you don't need to go crazy tight. And just mop up any excess fluid with your paper towel. If that was it and you were happy with that, then just a case of refitting your pads, but we're going to show you a full bleed as well. Okay, to do a full bleed, we're going to pop some Shimano mineral oil into this syringe. Half full will be plenty, especially as this brake already has some fluid in it. And we're just going to expel any air in the syringe. We're going to attach the syringe to the caliper. So there's a small rubber cap which helps prevent any dirt from getting into the bleed nipple, which will then get into the system. Pop that to one side. We're going to get our 7mm spanner, ring spanner. We're going to position that on the caliper so we're able to undo the bleed nipple. On the Shimano syringe, we have this small piece of plastic and this plastic ring. And once you've pushed the hose onto the bleed nipple, we can secure it by pushing this plastic collar into place, and that's what this little plastic bar is for. At the other end, we're going to remove our bleed port screw. We're going to fit our bleed tool. Put that somewhere safe. Screw our bleed tool into the lever, just nip it up and remove our plunger. It has a bit of fluid in there from earlier, but it doesn't need any in there because we're going to pass some through from the syringe. Next, we're going to open the bleed port. So our spanner is captive on the bleed nipple at the caliper. I'm going to open that up. Quarter turn should be enough. And then we can pass the fluid from this syringe up through the system and into our bleed tool at the lever. Don't use all of the fluid in the syringe. When you've almost used it all, then just close the bleed nipple, just nip that up, and then we can remove our syringe and spanner from the caliper. If you found you're getting lots of bubbles coming up, then you might need to repeat the process, but it's unlikely. Mop up any excess fluid at the bleed nipple and refit the dust cap to prevent any dirt getting into the system. Then we're back to where we were earlier. So up at the lever, we can give it a pull and see if we can get any more air out the system. Again, you can use your screwdriver or some non-marring tool to give it a tap and see if you can get any air up and out that lever. You should have a solid lever feel by this point. If not, something's gone wrong. And once you're happy that you've got all the air out of the system, if it still feels rubbish, then just repeat the process. But if it feels good, like this one does, then pop your plunger into your bleed tool. Remove it and refit your bleed screw. Nip that up. Clean up any excess. Can use some alcohol here just to make sure it's all gone. And once you're happy, we can refit our hood. And then we're going to refit our pads. So we're going to remove our bleed block. Just remove the pin, drop the block out. We're going to fit our pads. So right hand side goes on the drive side, right hand side of the bike from the rider's perspective, left on the left. See the legs of the spring need to sit on either side of the friction material. They slot straight in, and then we fit our pad pin. Just nip that up. Fit your clip to the end of the pad pin, just in case it does come loose. Then we can refit our wheel. And that should be it. Brake should be bled. Give it a good test just to make sure that everything's secure. After you've bled your brakes, please make sure you dispose of your oil responsibly. Local tip should have a place to get rid of waste oil, so that's the place to get rid of it. And before you take your bike out on the road, just find somewhere quiet off the road to test the brakes and make sure they're doing what they should do. If you have any doubts, take your bike to a local bike shop. Get the mechanic there to check it out and make sure everything's safe before you go out and hit the road. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Cheers.